there is a folder on your C drive where you should always store your Tribal Data Toolbox. And one of the reasons for that is where you will store your files that get imported into the toolbox. But also, it's always a good idea to be consistent in where you store your files. We recommend a system that we call the trunk, branch, leaf method of keeping track of your toolbox files. And on the screen you see a diagram of a tree, and the trunk is where you will always go to add data to your toolbox, to generate reports, etc. Some people call this their workhorse copy of their toolbox, and it's in your C drive in a folder called Tribal Data Toolbox _ version 2.1. Then what we recommend for backup copies of your toolbox, which of course you know, everybody knows you have to have backup copies of pretty much everything now, that we call on the branch, which is a folder where you store your toolbox backups. And then the leaf is a copy of your toolbox backups that you store on a USB drive. So now I'm going to demonstrate how that looks on my computer. So what we want to do is navigate to this folder. So I'm going to my trunk toolbox, and that is in this folder on my C drive, and you can see the path here up in the navigation bar, and it's in the Tribal Data Toolbox _ version 2.1 folder, and this is the only copy of this Access database called the Tribal Data Toolbox that has this name on my computer. It's really important to only have one copy of the toolbox with this name on your computer, because if you have multiple copies, even if they're in different folders, sometimes we make mistakes and start entering data into an old toolbox, and that can be really frustrating. So let's just say that I open up this toolbox and I enter the password, and it opens up. And let's say that I've done some importing of metadata, and it was a whole lot of data, and it was one of the first files I imported. I want to make sure that I back this up. So one of the unusual things about Access is that it's difficult to back up an Access database while it's open. So the first thing to do is, after you finish doing the work that you are going to be finished with for the day, and you want to make a backup copy, close the toolbox. Now, one thing to notice is if you close the toolbox itself, but don't close Microsoft Access, and you can see that I still have Microsoft Access open, if you look at the folder Tribal Data Toolbox _ version 2.1 in your C drive, you can see that there's this locked file. So as long as you keep Access open, you're not going to be able to copy this toolbox. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of Access completely, and now you'll see that we've just got the Tribal Data Toolbox, and it's closed, and it doesn't have that locked file. So how do I make a backup copy of this? Well, what I want to do is, you see, this is my workhorse, that's my trunk. What I want to do is create a copy out here on the branch in this folder called Toolbox Backups. So what I'm going to do is right-click my trunk copy. I'm going to say Copy, and I'm going to open up my Toolbox Backups folder, and I keep my files backed up by month. So this is the first backup that I'm going to have for March 2013. So I'm going to right-click in this folder, say Paste, and it pastes a copy of the toolbox that I just worked in. Now, right away, be sure to rename this, because now we've got two copies of the toolbox on our computer, and we do not want them to have the same name. So I right-click it, and I say Rename, and I'm going to just add Backup with the date. So I'm going to call this 3/4/2013, and that way this is clearly named as a backup copy. So that basically is how you make a copy of the toolbox for a backup in terms of just keeping it on your hard drive. Now, I don't know about you guys, but my computer hard drives have failed. I've been on networks where the network server has failed. So you also want to make a backup copy on what we call the leaf, which is just on a USB drive. So in order to do that, I'm going to go back into my backup folder, and I'm actually going to copy this whole folder. I keep on a USB drive the most recent month of Toolbox backups, and I encourage you to go ahead and keep as many backups as you want. Sometimes it's interesting to go back to previous versions, and sometimes it's invaluable in case you make a mistake. So I'm just going to copy this whole folder onto my USB drive, which is blank, and I'm going to use this this USB drive only for Toolbox backups. So basically now I've got a copy of the Toolbox that I just entered data into, and it's still on my C drive, but I created a copy in this Toolbox backups folder. And you could do this every Friday or every day if your server is failing or you get new IT people or something. I make a copy of the entire folder of this Toolbox backups, the current month or however much fits on your USB drive, and I keep that in this leaf. So again, the main points are have only one copy of the Tribal Data Toolbox on your computer with this name, Tribal Data Toolbox version 2.1. It's really, really important to have only one file on your computer with this name. All the other files, such as in these backups, rename by right-clicking, and you can make Toolbox backups in the morning and in the afternoon. Sometimes if I'm importing, say we're importing old data that we've downloaded from AQS or from Excel and we've imported a year's worth, I'll make a backup copy right then. So just right click, rename it, backup with today's date, and then every Friday or whenever is appropriate, copy it onto a USB drive that then you take home with you in case something terrible happens and you lose your computer. You still have this data on your USB drive on your removable leaf. So that is the trunk, branch, leaf method of Toolbox backups.